with no money. I went and found a snow bunny. I came up off money. I got that hustle and flow money. I jumped off the PJ with bags. I loaded them into a Tahoe. I pulled off in a Lamborghini. Me feeling like Rollo. She want me to play no. It's paper. You talk fast, I just didn't wanna. I hate her. Ay, ooh, I came up. Ooh, I came up. Ooh, that man up. Red bottle, red bitch, the red flag, I'm flamed up. When I went fed, I came back home and changed my name up. Now what they call me? Next two federal, fed for real. Game up. On God. Yellow, drink yellow. Yeah, Kush make me think better. Perks make me better. Ooh, I'm flirting with the bank teller. Ay, I look like a Kia. I look like a Lord. Shorty wanna with a Gia. I'ma beat the swole.
October 25th, 2023, 7:20. A jogger on Murdoch Road in southeast Dallas stumbles upon a sight that will scar the community forever. A woman's body abandoned on the roadside, a single gunshot wound piercing her chest. Her life cut short in cold blood. Her name was Dishaye Stevenson, a successful businesswoman, a devoted daughter, a loving mother, a wife whose world revolved around family and community, but within hours, everything she built, everything she lived for everything she loved was ripped away. What begins as a simple missing person call spirals into a discovery so shocking it forces everyone to ask, how well do you really know the person you sleep beside? How close can love sit next to danger? How quickly can affection turn into fear? This is not just a story of murder. This is a story of secrets hidden, arguments, chilling evidence, and a truth that would devastate an entire city tonight. We uncover the haunting final hours of a woman who gave everything to those she loved, and the betrayal that ended with her body lying cold on a Dallas roadside. And before we uncover the chilling truth, I need you to do one thing for me. Please subscribe right now. Let us hit 1,000 subscribers together, because every time you subscribe, you help keep the memory of victims like Dishaye alive. You help spread awareness that can save lives, and you make sure stories like this one never get silenced. So please subscribe now, and let's reach 1,000 together. Dishaye Stevenson was more than just a successful woman. She was a name that carried weight in her community, a mother, a daughter, a friend, a business owner. Her life was the kind of story that inspired admiration, a young woman who rose from humble beginnings in Dallas, Texas, to carve out her place as a respected entrepreneur. She had built her own brand step by step, taking nothing for granted. Every decision was made with her family in mind. Every late night at her desk, every early morning meeting, every dollar earned was driven by one purpose: to secure a better life for her daughter and to be the solid rock for her ailing mother who depended on her care. Dishaye's friends described her as resilient yet warm, a woman who could walk into a room full of strangers and leave with allies who admired her determination. Her social media posts were filled with affirmations, positive words, encouragement for others, and the smiling faces of her daughter and mother. But like so many true stories, there was another side, a private side she rarely showed, and it was there in the quiet moments of her life that the seeds of tragedy began to grow. When she met Michael Smith at a local community event, it seemed harmless, even perfect. He was charming, confident, attentive, everything a hard-working woman might dream of in a partner, someone who appeared ready to share the weight of her responsibilities. He brought flowers to her office, surprised her with dinners, made promises of stability. He knew the right words to say, the right moves to make their relationship was fast-paced. Within months, her friends were seeing engagement photos, then wedding pictures, the image of happiness. Yet behind those photographs, a different story was unfolding. One that those close to her tried to warn her about. Michael's charm was a mask, and when it slipped, it revealed something darker. He began questioning her work hours, her phone calls, her friendships. He accused her of neglect whenever she spent too much time on business trips or caring for her mother. The same independence that once drew him to her became the source of his resentment. He wanted her time, her attention, her control. Neighbors recalled hearing shouting behind closed doors, arguments that grew louder. More intense police records would later show that dishaye had called once after a heated fight, but she never pressed charges, perhaps believing, like so many victims do, that things would change, that love could repair the cracks. But the cracks only deepened. Michael started showing up unannounced at her office, tracking her movements, sending relentless texts. If she didn't respond quickly enough, he isolated her from friends, making her choose between peace at home or conflict with him. Dishaye's daughter confided to a teacher that she sometimes feared the way Michael looked at her mother, a stare filled not with love, but with rage, bottled up, ready to erupt. Yet despite the warnings, despite the signs, dishaye pressed on, balancing business, motherhood, and caregiving, trying to hold her world together. She wore her strength like armor, but even the strongest armor can shatter. What the outside world saw was a woman at the peak of her success, a woman who had it all. What the inside world knew was that she was walking a dangerous tightrope. One wrong move, one bad day, one eruption away from everything collapsing. And tragically, that collapse would. Not come in silence, it would come in a way so shocking, so brutal that it would haunt her family forever. It began like an ordinary day, but nothing about that day would end ordinary. Dishaye Stevenson woke up early, prepared breakfast for her daughter, checked in on her mother, helped her through the morning routine, then left for work as usual. Everything seemed normal on the surface. She spoke to a client by phone, answered emails, sent a cheerful message to a friend. Her digital footprint showed activity. Her phone records revealed constant buzzing. But those were the last traces of her normal life, because by evening, everything would shift. Dishaye had plans to meet with a colleague to discuss a new business opportunity, but she never showed up. She had promised her daughter she would be home before dinner, but the evening hours passed and there was no sign of her. Calls went unanswered. Texts were left unread. Her daughter grew worried, then scared by 9 p.m. Her phone was going straight to voicemail. Her car was not in the driveway, her office was locked, her purse and personal belongings untouched at home. At first, friends thought maybe she had been delayed, maybe she was exhausted and needed space. But as midnight approached, panic set in. Dishaye was not the kind of woman to vanish without word. Her daughter called, relatives called, neighbors reached out to anyone who might have seen her, but the answer was always the same. No one had. Michael, her husband, was contacted. He claimed he hadn't seen her either. His story was vague, inconsistent. He said she left the house angry. He said she stormed out during an argument. He said maybe she needed space. Maybe she had gone to clear her mind, but none of it made sense. Her car was still missing her credit cards, unused her bank account, untouched her phone. Dead for a woman so active, so connected to suddenly go silent was not just unusual, it was alarming. The Dallas police were eventually called. A missing persons report was filed. The first 48 hours were filled with searches, friends canvassing neighborhoods, family pleading online, strangers resharing her photos. The community was mobilized, but the fear kept rising because nothing was adding up. There were no sightings, no surveillance, no witnesses, no signs of a voluntary disappearance. Her daughter's cries filled the house. Her mother, too frail to search, could only whisper prayers, hoping for a miracle. And in the midst of this fear, suspicion began to circle around Michael, his demeanor at the police station, cold, detached, lacking urgency. Neighbors told investigators about the arguments, about the shouting they had overheard. Friends revealed Dishaye's messages about feeling controlled, trapped, frightened. Her colleague confirmed she had been on edge the last. Holes and every hour that passed deepened the dread and raised one burning question: where was Dishaye Stevenson? The investigation into Dishaye Stevenson's disappearance began with urgency because detectives knew the first hours were critical. They retraced her steps from the morning of her last known movements. They checked her office, reviewed surveillance cameras from nearby businesses, analyzed phone records, but the trail was already growing cold. Her last confirmed activity was a phone call with a colleague around midday. After that silence, detectives turned to the people closest to her, and that meant Michael Smith, her husband. From the moment he sat down in the interview room, his demeanor raised red flags. Instead of panic, he carried an unsettling calm when asked about the timeline of events. His answers were scattered. First, he said they argued and she left. Then he changed it to, she left for work and never came back. Then later, he claimed she may have gone to see a friend. Detectives knew the inconsistencies were more than memory lapses. They were cracks that needed to be pried open. Dishaye's daughter told investigators she remembered her mother promising to be home that evening. She remembered hearing an argument over the phone earlier in the day, and she remembered her mother's tone, not angry but tired, weary as if she was done fighting. The neighbors backed up these claims, reporting loud shouting from the house that same afternoon, but no one saw Dishaye leave the house alive. That detail chilled detectives because if no one saw her leave, the focus shifted inward to the home. Michael's behavior became the spotlight. He volunteered no details, offered little concern. When detectives pressed harder, he asked for a lawyer by the second interview. That request alone sent shockwaves through the investigation because innocent spouses often beg to help search, not shield themselves. Still evidence was needed. Detectives pulled cell tower data, tracking Dishaye's phone. They found the signal dropped not far from her own neighborhood. Before going dead around the same time, Michael's phone showed unusual activity. Pings near an industrial area. He claimed he was running errands, but the receipts never matched the timeline. The story kept collapsing piece by piece. They obtained a search warrant for the house. Nothing obvious appeared, but cadaver dogs reacted near the garage. The scent triggered more questions. Luminol testing hinted at possible blood traces, though not enough at first to confirm Michael's car was examined. And what detectives found next pushed the case forward. Fibers matching Dishaye's clothing. A faint stain later confirmed as her blood and GPS records, placing him in the exact area where her phone last pinged his alibi was breaking. His confidence was unraveling, and yet he still maintained he had no idea where she was. He claimed she left angry. He claimed he tried to call her back. He claimed he went searching for her, but the data told a different story. Friends of Dishaye turned over messages she had sent days before, her disappearance messages where she confessed feeling trapped, controlled, terrified. She wrote about wanting to leave, about filing for divorce, about fearing his reaction. That context painted a chilling picture, a woman on the edge of breaking free and a man on the edge of losing control. Detectives began piecing it together, not just as a missing persons case, but as a potential homicide, the kind where the victim's body had yet to be found, but the evidence already whispered the truth. For weeks, the search for Dishaye Stevenson consumed the community. Flyers were posted across Dallas. Vigils were held. Friends refused to give up her daughter's voice, cracked in every plea, begging anyone who knew anything to come forward yet. Despite the effort, despite the leads, nothing concrete appeared. Detectives pressed Michael harder. They monitored his calls. They followed his movements. They built a case that seemed clear, yet without a body. The silence still gave him room to deny everything. But that silence would not last, because in early morning hours, nearly 3 weeks after her disappearance, a call came into the Dallas police. A city maintenance worker assigned to an industrial dumping site had noticed something unusual. A foul odor seeping from a pile of discarded debris. At first, he assumed it was just trash rotting in the Texas heat, but when he moved closer, he saw something that stopped him cold. What looked like a blanket partially buried in dirt and covered with branches. When officers arrived, they pulled the blanket back, and what they found confirmed the darkest fears inside were the remains of a woman. Her body wrapped hurriedly, hidden as if discarded like waste. The medical examiner was called in. Fingerprints later confirmed what the heart already knew it. Was dishaye Stevenson, her daughter's screams echoed when she was told her mother was gone, the community shattered in grief. The condition of her body revealed the brutality she suffered: trauma to the head, broken ribs, evidence of strangulation, the very signs of rage and violence. Investigators immediately tied the location back to Michael because the dumping ground matched the exact area where his phone had pinged the night she vanished. Surveillance cameras from a gas station near the site caught his car passing by at the same hour. He swore he was elsewhere. His story collapsed under the weight of evidence. The discovery was more than just finding dishaye. It was finding the truth. It was the piece that turned suspicion into certainty, the one thing Michael could no longer deny because the body told the story his lies tried to erase. And yet even in death, dishaye's dignity spoke volumes. Her determination to live her devotion to her daughter, her endless strength made her loss feel heavier than anyone could bear. The community that once prayed for her safe return now gathered in mourning. Candles lit faces wet with tears. People whispering the same question over and over. How could the man who vowed to love and protect her be the one who silenced her life forever? The trial of Michael Smith for the murder of dishaye Stevenson became one of the most watched cases in Dallas. The courtroom packed with reporters, family members, community leaders, and strangers who had followed the story. From the day dishaye vanished, every seat was filled, every hallway crowded with people waiting to hear how a man who once promised forever could be accused of such brutality. The prosecution painted a picture of obsession, control, and rage. They laid out the timeline piece by piece, the neighbors who heard the arguments, the daughter who heard the phone call, the friends who received text messages of fear, the police who tracked Michael's phone to the exact site where dishaye's body was found, surveillance footage, receipts, digital footprints. Everything was connected like puzzle pieces falling into place. They showed the jury the fibers from dishaye's clothing found in his car, the bloodstain in his trunk, the cell tower records proving he lied. They brought in forensic experts who explained how the injuries on her body matched a violent struggle. The signs of strangulation, the broken ribs, the trauma to the head, evidence of a man consumed not with love but with fury. They even revealed messages dishaye had written in the days before her death. Words that carried haunting weight about wanting to leave, about fearing his reaction, about not knowing how much longer she could live in his shadow. The defense tried to argue there was no direct witness, that the case was circumstantial, that Michael was simply a husband, grieving, unfairly accused. But every word, every attempt crumbled under the evidence, and every time Michael sat at the defense table, his cold expression, his lack of remorse, his refusal to even glance at dishaye's daughter only deepened the jury's view of him. The courtroom was silent when the prosecution ended their closing argument with a single sentence: he promised to love her, and instead he chose to bury her in the dirt. When the jury deliberated, the weight was tense, every heartbeat heavy, every whisper sharp. And when they returned, the foreman stood with the verdict, guilty of murder. The room erupted, some with tears, some with relief, some with rage. Michael sat motionless, his eyes fixed forward, no apology, no explanation. As if still holding on to his lies, the judge delivered the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dishaye's daughter wept in her grandmother's arms, the family finally holding a sliver of justice, but no verdict. No sentence, no prison walls could undo the pain, no outcome could bring back the woman whose light was stolen. The trial ended, not with triumph, but with a reminder that behind every headline, every verdict, every statistic is a family shattered, a community scarred, and a young daughter who will forever live with the memory of the day her world was torn apart. Dishaye Stevenson's story is not just another crime, it is a mirror forcing us to ask ourselves the hard questions. How many red flags do we ignore in the name of love? How many times do we stay silent when fear tells us to speak? How many women, men, and children live behind closed doors carrying secrets of control, isolation, and violence, hoping that tomorrow will be better, when sometimes tomorrow never comes? Her story teaches us that success, kindness, and love cannot shield anyone from danger. When it hides in the people closest to us, it reminds us that domestic violence is not just an argument, it is a warning sign, a pattern that grows louder and deadlier if ignored. It urges us to listen to the cries of daughters, to the whispers of neighbors, to the texts of friends who say they feel unsafe, because those whispers may be the last chance to stop tragedy. It forces us to reflect on justice and ask, why must a woman lose her life before her warnings are taken seriously? Why must her daughter grow up without a mother? Before society admits the system too often fails victims. These are questions every viewer must carry, because true crime is not just about the horror, it is about the lessons, the reminders, the change we must demand for ourselves and for others. If you are watching this, you are part of Dishaye's legacy, because remembering her name, remembering her laughter, remembering her sacrifice, means her story will not vanish like her life was made to. It means she lives on through awareness, through action, through the voices of people like you who refuse to let silence win. So as we close, let Dishaye's memory echo in your mind, not as a victim, but as a reminder of what love should never become and what control must never be allowed to turn into. And if you believe stories like hers must be told, if you believe justice must be remembered and victims must never be forgotten, then make sure you subscribe to Viral Crime Stories, because together we carry the memory together, we share the truth together, we keep these voices alive.